All right, everyone, it's time for the next section of insect anatomy introduction. This will be an introduction to the circulatory system and the blood or the hemolymph. So, going back to the very beginning, when we talked about kind of the fundamental structure of insects and the fundamental cross section of an insect, you have the individual metameres. This is a cross section. And so you have, the legs coming off the side. And in the middle, you have the gut. On the bottom, you have the nerve cord. So this is the ventral nerve cord. And on the top, you have the heart or the dorsal vessel. So sometimes this is called a heart. In the anterior portions near the head and thorax, it's sometimes referred to as the aorta. Technically, it should be called the dorsal vessel. Heart and aorta are older terms that are not used consistently, but you should be aware of them. I frequently just call it the heart. And then, there are a number of other organs represented in the cross section, like there'll be Malpighian tubules. Usually there's a ton of muscles on the exterior portion, but the internal cavity is full of hemolymph. Which is the insect version of blood. And the hemolymph is not like human blood or mammal blood. It is primarily water, plasma, which is made up of ions like salt, proteins, and amino acids, loose fats, just like you find in plasma in mammals, and then something called hemocytes, which are blood cells, but they're not like human red blood cells. These are more equivalent to white blood cells and platelets. We don't call them white blood cells and platelets, but that's what they do. So they are primarily involved in the immune response of the insect. So this will be like phagocytosis, where one cell will engulf like an intruding bacterial cell or viral cell. It will be involved in something called encapsulation, which is when multiple white blood cells or hemocytes will surround and enclose a parasite, and then they will melanize themselves and form a black poisoned capsule around the invader, as well as involved in sealing wounds and things like that. So that's what hemocytes are. It's not like humans where we have red blood cells that transport oxygen, because in most insects, oxygen is transported by the tracheal system, which we already covered. There are insects that have hemoglobin, the iron molecules which humans use to transport oxygen. They do have hemoglobin in their hemolymph, free hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin is used for oxygen transfer, but generally those insects live in very low oxygen environments or are aquatic in some way, and so they are at a higher need for oxygen from the environment than something like a dragonfly would be, because they exist on land and in the air. So hemolymph does occasionally have hemoglobin in it. Sometimes they use other ions like copper to transport oxygen. So generally in most insects, hemolymph is clear because it's just this plasma, ion, proteins, water, and white, and these hemocytes, which are just white blood cells. Sometimes it's yellow, kind of goopy, and then with these insects that carry these ions for oxygen exchange, like copper or iron ions, or they are either, sometimes it's red, sometimes it's green, and sometimes it's blue. So for like blue arthropods, blue-blooded arthropods, that would be the most famous of those is the horseshoe crab, which their blue blood is used in pharmaceuticals. So how does this hemolymph get around the insect body? If you will remember back to like the first morphology talk, and what is an insect? Insects are defined by their open circulatory system. So they don't have they really have very few veins and arteries to transport blood around their body, unlike mammals, where like we have a heart and this incredibly complex network of arteries, capillaries, and veins, which transport blood around our body. Insect blood, or hemolymph, just kind of swishes around inside. Let's change this to red. Insect hemolymph just kind of swishes around inside the insect's body directionally, but not within an enclosed vascular system. So instead, what they have on the top of their body, here in orange, this orange tube on top of their body, this is the dorsal vessel. So in the rear part, this is frequently called the heart, and in the front part, it's called the aorta, although the entire thing can just be called the dorsal vessel. And this generates the majority of the motive force of the hemolymph and how it keeps it going directionally. This is a muscular tube, and in the rear of this tube, in parts of the thorax and in the abdomen, it's full of unidirectional holes called ostia. And these holes allow the blood in, for the most part, but don't allow it to go back out. So the blood goes in through these holes, and then this entire tube is contracted, starting in the back, moving forward, and it pushes the blood towards the head. Through the aorta, up to the head, and up through the wings here, up to the head, up to the antennae, where it is then released out of the aorta. This then, through muscular contraction of the body, the blood is then pushed back towards the abdomen on both the dorsal and ventral surface. For the ventral surface, because it doesn't have this heart, it has a muscular construct called the ventral diaphragm. And it's basically just a muscular wall that runs along the ventral or stomach portion of the insect, generally along the nerve cord. And it serves two purposes. One, it kind of causes the nerve cord to shake and move and oscillate, which speeds up the rate at which neurotransmitters and chemicals and hormones from the nerve cord are transmitted into the blood. But it also pulsates so as to drive the blood back towards the abdomen from the head. So you end up with this circular motion of the blood within the diaphragm, within the abdominal and thoracic cavities. So you end up with a very controlled sort of flow where it goes to the head and then it works its way back towards the abdomen. Within the legs, there will be valves that allow it in but restrict backflow, so you get a circular motion within the legs that is propelled by muscular contractions within the body, as well as with the antennae. It will go up into the antennae and then circle back out, and also in the wings. So it'll circle around the wings through the same sort of valve mechanism. And eventually it moves back towards the ostia and moves back into the heart. And round it goes through this muscular contractions. So it's a much simpler way of moving blood around the body than what you see in vertebrates, or in especially in mammals. So that is the insect circulatory system. Very simple. Obviously, you could go into much more detail about how everything works, but we're not going to do that here because you all are probably not interested in something that complicated this early on. Okay, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.